Hi paper crafters, in this video I'd like to talk about the embossing folders, the problems that you might face while using them, and how to solve them. Embossing folders of different producers might be a bit thicker or thinner, and also the pressure in die cutting machines might vary. But that doesn't mean that a certain embossing folder is not suitable for you. You can achieve perfect results with any folder and any die cutting machines that you have. So let's have a closer look. So this is a very common problem that I guess everyone is familiar with. The folder is tearing up the paper. That means that the pressure in the machine is a bit stronger than you would want to, and also different papers might have different qualities. Some are more fragile and tend to break, and some are more pliable. Now let's open up my die cutting machine and I will show you a few ways to solve this problem. I'm using platinum die cutting machine by Spellbinders, but you can use whatever you have. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter. The folder I'm using is by Paper Discovery. This one has ivy pattern and I'll be using it as an example. I've cut a sheet of patterned paper into a few pieces, and this way we'll have the same paper on all samples. So I'm placing one piece into my embossing folder, covering it up with the cutting plate. That is the standard sandwich for platinum machine. Then I'm sanding it through, and this is what I have. Platinum does have a strong pressure, so in this case it looks quite fine, but here we have a bit of that over embossing. The paper is torn in some areas. Now let's talk about the first way to fix it. I guess this way of fixing the problem is the most well known. You just have to spritz the paper with clean water using the fine mister, and I'm spritzing it on both sides. Actually, here I'm moving the die cutting machine out of the way, and you don't have to make the paper wet. You just have to make sure that the water absorbs into the paper, and here you can see right away that it becomes much more pliable and much softer. That is because the water have relaxed the fibers of the paper and made it more pliable. So now I'm placing that piece of paper into my folder and sending it through the machine. Now let's take out the paper, and here you see that the problem is actually fixed. We don't have any tear-ups. However, this method is not going to work for all papers. If your paper has some kind of plastic coating, the water will not absorb into it. If you treated the paper with ink that is water soluble, you will stain your artwork. So let's have a look at the method number 2. This method is so far my favorite, and it's no doubt the easiest one. All you have to do is to place a sheet of thin paper along with your main paper into the folder. I'm using just a scrap piece of printer paper here. This piece of paper is meant to kind of prevent your main paper from getting into all crevices too much, and this way it will keep it from breaking. Now let's send it through the machine and look at the result. This time I got absolutely perfect embossing, and I don't even have to wait for the paper to dry. You can hardly see it on camera, the difference is not huge, but I think that the quality of this embossing is even better than the previous one. This method also works perfectly for vellum. As you know, vellum is a bit fragile and tends to break easily, so all you have to do is to fold a piece of printed paper in half and place your vellum piece inside, and then you're placing that entire thing into your folder and sending it through. This way you're going to get a perfectly embossed piece of vellum without any holes and tear-ups. If you tried the previous two approaches and they still don't work, there is a third one, and this one works in absolutely 100% of cases. This method is actually changing the pressure in your die cutting machine. As I mentioned, for my die cutting machine, the embossing sandwich is a folder plus one cutting plate. If we put them together and look from this side, we'll have the thickness of your embossing sandwich. If the folder is tearing the paper, you have to bring this thickness down. That means I'm going to replace this cutting plate with something that is thinner. Here I have a number of different plates. Some of them are from platinum, some of them are from my Gemini foil press. I also have a couple of rubber mats. Now all you have to do is to play around with whatever you have and find the right thickness for your embossing folder. If you don't have a lot of plates and mats, you can totally use a few sheets of cardstock. They will work perfectly as shims. And this is how you're actually playing with the thickness of your sandwich. Here I tried one rubber mat, that was not enough, so I added another one and I got some embossing, but it's still too weak and I didn't get the nice deep embossing result that I'm looking for. Then I tried using the 3D embossing plate, which is a rather thin plate, but it didn't give me enough pressure for perfect impression. So I decided to add a thin rubber mat to that sandwich, but I could feel right away that that pressure was too strong. Please don't try to push anything through the machine, it should really go nice and smoothly. But that means that the thickness that I'm looking for should be a bit thinner than my thin embossing mat. So what I'm going to do is to use a couple of pieces of patterned paper, and those are the ones that I got the over embossing at. I'm placing them over my embossing folder, I'm sanding it through, and this seemed to be just the right thickness because I got the perfect impression. As I mentioned before, this method of finding the right thickness for your embossing sandwich works in 100% of cases. So I hope that proves that it's wrong to think that a certain folder is not suitable for your machine or that a machine is not suitable for you. You really can achieve perfect results each time without doing any harm to your folders or your machines. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and thank you so much for watching.